Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakuya. The title of today's talk is We're Not Supposed to Fit In. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. I've been reflecting recently on Buddhism's first noble truth, which states life is suffering. Now, normally this is understood with the focus being on individual life and, by extension, individual suffering. We have these physical bodies, which are our vehicles, which we use towards enlightenment, but they are also sources of suffering. They are sources of suffering because they are of a nature to be born, to grow old, to get sick, and to die. As if that weren't enough, they also are of a nature to lose friends, gain enemies, lose the things we want, and gain the things we don't want. I, of course, am referring to the 8 winds of Buddhism that this flesh is heir to, and as we sway in the winds, being influenced by them day to day, moment to moment, year to year, we suffer. And the practice of Buddhism is the practice of learning to work skillfully with the 8 winds, accepting them when we can, resisting them when we cannot, but working with them in such a way so that they hurt less and we gain some measure of inner peace. Now, this is a good and proper teaching, and understanding the First Noble Truth just in this way will move us a long way on our path towards enlightenment. However, recently I began to wonder what would happen if we thought about life in this sense, in a more collective, more cultural way. What if we change the First Noble Truth from life is suffering to popular culture is suffering? Well, for that to work, we would first need to understand what is popular culture, and secondly, what is the nature of the thing. And to be clear, in this talk, when I refer to popular culture, I'm referring to the social media, the TV programs, the movies, the commercials, etc., that we experience in our day-to-day lives and that we use to make decisions. What is the nature of this thing, the nature of our culture here in the West? Well, from what I can surmise, culture is of a nature to state we, as human beings, have no inherent right to be here. In a capitalist society, we must earn our right to exist. We should not grow old. If we are 50 years old, we should look like we're 25, and if we're not, we're doing it wrong. We should never get sick. We should always be in perfect health, and if we're not, then clearly that is some moral failing on our part. Popular culture tells us that dying is for suckers, that we must always be working, always be competing through our children, through our art, through our work, through our social media accounts, to build a legacy that will live on after we die. Culture tells us that we should always be thinking about the 45-minute montage that's going to play at our funeral. Popular culture is of a nature to say everyone should be our friend, no one should be our enemy. And if people don't like us and clearly there's something wrong with what we're doing, or something wrong with what they're doing. Finally, popular culture says that bad things should never happen to us, Because if we do things the right way at the right time, if we manifest and have positive attitudes, then everything will work out exactly like it's supposed to every time. Now, what you're probably understanding is what I'm getting at is that popular culture as it exists in the West perpetuates the 8 winds of suffering. It's a source of tremendous heartache and pain for everyone involved. It'd be nice if we could just get rid of it, but the thing is, popular culture is much like these physical bodies. It is a source of suffering. It is also largely inescapable. So the practice for Buddhists then is to learn how to work skillfully with the culture in the same way we learn to work skillfully with our bodies. Figuring out exactly how they work, figuring out what we do that causes suffering and what other choices we can make to relieve that suffering. John Newman, a popular English theologian, described the life of a religious person as that of a wild animal going into the forest, resisting what it must, assimilating what it can. And this makes a lot of sense to me because obviously any animal that resists every single thing that's put in front of it will die rather quickly. But at the same time, an animal that assimilates everything it comes in contact with, tries to eat every plant in the forest, tries to make friends with every hungry animal it meets, will also die very quickly. The successful animal and the successful Buddhist knows what to resist and what to assimilate. This is called discernment, or the word we would use in Buddhism is wisdom. Now, it is important that we understand as we use our wisdom, as we develop it through our spiritual practice, there will be moments where we will assimilate things that the popular culture says we should not, and when we resist things that everyone around us thinks is good. We will, as a result of our Buddhist practice, wait for it, lose friends and gain enemies. Now, this is a natural and normal and inescapable part of both life and religious training. And to understand why that is, we can do a simple thought experiment. Let's say you and another person are standing in the middle of Michigan State, and you decide that together you want to go north until you hit Lake Michigan. Now, as long as the both of you have that same goal, you will walk together in lockstep, the best of friends. But in the midst of your walk, if your friend decides they actually want to head east to see the Atlantic Ocean, well, now we have a choice to make. We can continue towards our goal of seeing Lake Michigan, which requires us to walk north, or we can let go of our goal and we can go east with our friend to see the Atlantic Ocean. But common sense tells us we cannot do both at the same time. We have to choose what we will assimilate and what we will resist. Now, no matter what choice we make, that doesn't mean that we necessarily are good people or our friends is necessarily bad. What it does mean is that we may have to part ways with them because our goals no longer align with theirs. As Buddhists, we as a people live apart from the world because our goal is different from the goal of the people around us. Culture, or popular culture, tells us that we should chase after sensual pleasures. We should chase after wealth, fame, status, hookups. Religious practice, specifically Buddhist practice, tells us that our goal is the end of suffering for ourselves and others. Our goal is enlightenment. And in our journey towards enlightenment, there are times where we must part with the people around us, when we must resist what the popular culture tells us to do. We're not supposed to always fit in. For the Buddhist who possesses right view, the first tenet of the Noble Eightfold Path, we follow the example of the Buddha. We walk in his footsteps, we follow his path, and we work diligently to end suffering for ourselves and others. Our path is not one of fitting in. Rather, our path is one of being a light unto the world, an example of what's possible. This is why when Buddha realized enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, his path did not lead him back to the palace, back to the life of a prince. Rather, his path, his goal, required that he live as a mendicant monk for the next 45 years, spreading the Dharma, edifying the minds of anyone who would listen. As Buddhists, we are called to do the same. And as we do this, as we move through the world, using our discernment to choose what to assimilate and what to resist, we create an example. We live a life that makes things better both for ourselves and for the people around us.